All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee to order. And in accordance with the executive order that was released for open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting remotely via the Zoom platform, and it is being live streamed. We will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm trying to think, we're getting some feedback. Maybe Mrs. Trifolo, if you want to mute just for the moment.
Yep.
And for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As I mentioned, this meeting is being recorded and being live streamed by Templeton Community TV. It is on their YouTube channel. It is also live streamed on their Facebook page, so people can see it live streamed as well as see the recording. And we thank TCTV for providing that service for us. And just as a bit of housekeeping, I do want to announce who is on the call for the school committee. We have Mrs. Chartier, Mrs. Kojal, Mr. Marks, Mrs. Trifolo, Mrs. Matson, and Mr. Robichaud, and myself, Mrs. Hughes. Mr. Mason is not in attendance at this moment. I anticipate he'll be joining us shortly. Other people on the call, Dr. Kazvan, our superintendent, Ms. Calise, our assistant superintendent, Mrs. Geister, the business manager, Mrs. Varney, our superb administrative assistant. And we also have Eric Iben and Lisa Parker as representatives from the NDEA. So good evening, everybody, and thank you once again for joining us and for coming this evening. The first piece of regular business we have is approval of the meeting minutes of our July 22nd meeting. So if anyone would like to do so, I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of July 22nd, 2020 as written.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Marks. Do I have a second? And I'd actually have to hear it. I'm sorry, because.
Second.
And Mrs. Kojal is a second. Do I have any questions, comments, or feedback on those minutes? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote to approve them. Mrs. Chartier? Oop, unmute yourself.
Yes.
So, Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifolo?
Yes.
Mrs. Matson?
Yes.
And Mrs. Robichaud? Ooh, was that a yes? I'm sorry. I can't. Yes, I did hear a yes. Thank you. So that, and Mrs. Hughes says yes, so that is unanimous. Next up, do we have any bills or payroll for this week? Geister, was there anything? I didn't see anything out there, but I did want to double check.
No, there's nothing.
So we'll pass over bills and payroll since there was nothing to approve. Next on the agenda is our public input. I know we do have some public input this evening. So I will turn it over to Mrs. Varney to go ahead and start reading the public input that we have received so far.
Okay, thank you. So we received 4 different emails this week. So I'll read you in the order that they came in as they are written. The first one was received on Monday, July 27th from Mandy Adams. It reads, hello, I'm not sure if this is where I would send a question I have for the upcoming meeting, but my question is that if we start the school year off with our children at home, will we be taking a second look before second semester if things are getting better? And if it is getting better and things are able to loosen up a bit, will we have the option to send our kids second semester? My daughter would be going into her first year of preschool and my son going into 6th grade. And as of right now, we've decided to keep them home and do remote learning for our oldest and teach my daughter at home for this year. But I'm really struggling with them not having the structure the school gives them, especially for my preschooler. So I would hate to have to delay that an entire year. And I'm hoping that things that get better, she'll be able to at least go the second semester. So that's the first one.
Great, and thank you, Ms. Adams. We will address some of those questions this evening when we start talking about our reopening plans. So thank you for sending your feedback.
Okay, the second one was also received on Monday, July 27th, from Cassandra Puco Iusa. I'm butchering the name, Iosua. I apologize for that. And she says, not sure if this is the proper place to pose those questions, but it was guided here, so here goes nothing. In regards to the board meeting Wednesday night, I'm interested in possibly learning if we chose to keep our students home for learning through homeschool as opposed to virtual/in-school, how will they be reprocessed back into the system when we as the parents are ready? Does it still follow Massachusetts homeschool law, or would there be a different approach being taken, especially how easy/difficult it will be to get our kids back into the system without them losing progress if they are being homeschooled to state standards?
And thank you, Ms. And I'm gonna, Iosua, I believe this is how it's pronounced, for asking your questions. And once again, I think we'll touch on those items as well when we discuss the reopening plans. So thank you.
Okay, our third one came in on July 28th, and it is from Kelly Woodford. She's a parent at TES. She says, I heard a rumor for what the plan is for Templeton to return to school. Apparently kids will be separated into two groups. One group will go on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday will be cleaning day at the school with no students in the school. The second group of kids will go Thursday and Friday. Also, I heard they did not want to offer lunch/food to the children. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday will all be half days with dismissals of 11:45 a.m. The rest of the time during the week will be all remote learning. That is, if the school opens at all, because the teachers union is pushing to revoke mandatory in-person learning put in place by Governor Baker and the state. I also heard that the committee is not releasing any part of this plan to parents until after they submit this plan to the state to be approved. So the parents have no say in this matter, even though the many surveys we filled out spoke that parents want schools to open because their kids need the structure and socialization school and teachers and their peers provide. This has complete disaster and utter failure for everyone involved. Oh, and it is supposedly this way for the entire school year without rethinking this plan before the end of the fall when the second semester starts. Is this true? I truly hope not. What is the plan? I'm sorry, excuse me. I truly hope that this is not what the plan is, because this has complete failure and utter disaster written all over it. Parents who work cannot be expected to quit their jobs in order to homeschool their kids. They also cannot be expected to take more time off from work, or they will lose their jobs and not be able to provide for their families. Most workers are deemed essential and have had to work since day one. They don't have the luxury of having help with distance learning, and will most likely not do any of the work. And from what I understand, a majority of the kids/families do not do the work and fell behind. Now they will be even further behind if this is the plan. Parents are not trained educators, nor are parents going to become trained educators.
And thank you, Mrs. Woodford, for your comments and the questions that you've posed. And again, I believe we're going to discuss a lot of them this evening, also discussing the constraints that we're under with putting our plans together, which will hope answer a lot of those questions. So thank you again.
Okay, and our last one comes from Jamie Richard from this morning. She sent this. Good morning. I've been trying to follow along the best I can lately with the reopening options for school in the fall. I've heard the basic ideas of what is being mandated by the state in terms of physically going back to school, and they seem impossible to meet. One thing I have not heard anything about is how the teachers feel. I've seen a lot of teachers unions speaking up very loudly on their opinions of not going back because they feel they are putting the teachers at risk. There's a sit-in at the Capitol today of school nurses that want more safety guidelines put in place. I guess my question is more about the fact that even if we can get through all the hurdles of physically getting into school, will there be teachers there ready to teach them? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Richard, for your comment. And again, we'll be talking about our reopening plans this evening. And I know we have a commitment from our teachers to do what we need to with those reopening plans. So we'll hear a lot more about that this evening. So I want to just thank the 4 people who sent in the public comment. We appreciate hearing from everybody. Questions, comments, concerns. You'll hear more tonight. We will have opportunity for parents to give comment, and Dr. Casavant will talk about that. So there are a lot of plans in place for more communication. And again, we'll speak to a lot of those once we speak to the reopening plan. So thank you. I'm just checking the YouTube feed. I don't see any comments from anybody at this point. So I'm going to move on from public comment. We will keep an eye on it. If there's something pertinent that comes up, we'll take note of it. If we can't answer it during this meeting, we'll make sure that we do take note of it and it'll be followed up on. And if it's a parent question, then maybe at these parent meetings that you'll hear more about momentarily will be the place that we can get to an answer and flesh out more of the questions. So thank you, everyone. Okay. Next up, we have input from the NDEA. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Ivan and Ms. Parker.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you all once again. And it's good to hear the public's questions. And of course, we as a teachers union are entirely engaged in the process. We have teachers on all 3 reopening task forces in the 3 different levels, elementary, middle, and high. The teachers are meeting independently to take PD this summer. A lot of the PD my fellow teachers are taking has to do with using various tools to make whatever distance learning may occur as robust as possible. Teachers are taking more courses on that all the time, so that's good. And I did send the school committee through Dr. Casavan a letter to sort of outline where we are with this, because as much as there are parents torn, and I know the school committee has a lot to deal with, we as teachers are torn too about reopening and what it'll look like. We certainly want to be back in full person with all of our students without masks and all this stuff happening. But unfortunately, we have to react to the situation as it currently is. So I'm not going to read the whole letter to the school committee. I know that you guys have it so you can read it yourselves, but I will just make a few comments from it that I think are important. And so I want to draw your attention to the first paragraph. As educators in the Narragansett Regional Public Schools, we care deeply about the safety and well-being of our students, as well as the quality of the education we provide. Educators of the Narragansett School District have shown for decades that we hold the interests of our students, their physical, mental, and social well-being, and the success of this school system as our first priority. This students' first ethos compels these educators to go above and beyond in our effort to evaluate the opportunities for student achievement. We commit to these goals, knowing that meeting them means long hours in the evening, sacrificing time with family, and ignoring self-care and personal health. We do this out of a vocation to teaching. However, the current pandemic asks us to put our lives, our students' lives, those of our family members on the line for the sake of a full in-person reopening. And the NDEA cannot support any plan that puts its members or its students at such serious risk. And so, yes, to those parents, we do want to come back. We do want whatever education we provide to be robust. We worry about it very much. From our top achieving students to the students that struggle the most, we want everybody to succeed, and we know that remote learning creates some serious barriers. So the first thing I want to say is that we are committed, whatever the model, to educate the students to the best of our abilities. If there's a remote phase or some remote portions to that, we want that remote phase to be as robust as possible. Not necessarily what it looked like in the spring, because nobody was prepared. When I left my classroom on March 13th, if people remember, we weren't initially let back in the buildings. Everything I had, all my materials were sitting on my desk, not very far away, but I couldn't reach them. And so we all had to craft teaching from whatever we could grab at our skill level at that point in time, without all these extra tools that we are now going to have at our disposal. So I do want to tell the school committee, we're committed to whatever plan we settle on. We're going to work hard to make it work. Look, I know how much you guys have to deal with. You don't just have COVID to worry about. You've got the school budget, you've got school choice, you've got all kinds of extra issues. But the teachers, yes, we are deeply torn about what it's going to look like and how to achieve it, but we're committed to getting it done.
Thank you, Mr. Ivan. Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. Ms. Parker, did you want to add anything as well?
No, just everything Eric said is spot on. We've been in very close communication with each other, as well as the executive board, the NDEA itself, and obviously Dr. Cassavant and Kate. We meet with them regularly, so I feel like we're really all in the loop and there's no gotcha from anybody. And again, we want what's best for the kids and what's best for our teachers and our staff. We don't want anybody to feel in any way compromised. So we're just gonna need to work together to try to make some big decisions here.
Great. Thank you. Right, and thank you. We appreciate, you know, hearing the commitment from our teachers. We, as I said, I think we all know it, but it's good to hear it. And we know you've been working very hard with all of our task groups. So thank you. And, you know, safety obviously is one of our first concerns as well. So we appreciate all the support that you've given the committee, the school, the students, and everyone. So thank you. I just wanted to go back to the YouTube chat feed. There was a comment from Julie Kibby that I'd just like to read because it did come in right after we finished reading the letters. And Ms. Kibby said the comment that stated that all parents want the school to reopen and a full return to school is not the case. There are parents like myself that are pro-remote and supporting teachers. I want to make an apology to Mr. Richard. I believe I might have said Ms. and I apologize to that. Please forgive me. Ms. Kibby then added that she hopes that NRSD considers the health and safety of our children, school admin, teachers, the broader community, etc. So regarding the letter that Mr. Iben referenced, it will be put out. It is public record, so we can make that available after the meeting. We'll put it out there under the NDEA agenda item, and we'll make that available for the public to read in its entirety. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Next up, I just want to make sure I didn't skip anything, is the business manager's report. I see, Mrs. Geister, you've had some luck getting our system to cooperate, getting the reports done in a timely manner. So I'll let you take us through the reports that are out there. And I believe we've got some year-end numbers that are.
Yeah, the first one I want to bring to your attention is the general fund revenues. We've been talking about this throughout the year once we discovered that the Medicaid money was not going to come in as high as we thought. So I don't know if you took a look at it, but our overall revenues that we anticipated were $195,000 short. So what that means is if you look at our expense side, how we came out on that side, we were left over with 535,000 roughly. So basically a rough estimate of your E&D, if you'd like to look at that figure, is your expenses minus your shortfall in the income side. So you're looking at probably about 350,000, but this is just a rough guess because there's all kinds of other reports and numbers that go into that calculation, but that kind of gives you a general idea. And as far as the grants on the other side, the state, like I've said before, they took and rolled all the ones that could roll over. They made it so they all rolled over into this year. So there is no money lost there. Anything that we weren't able to spend in the appropriate categories due to COVID is now rolled over and it's available to us to use in this upcoming fiscal year. So you can see the balances on those. There's really not a lot of big ones because the majority of those grants, it's salaries, which we continue to pay throughout this because our people were working. And revolving accounts are revolving. You know, there's school choices down. Our final payment that we got in June was quite a bit lower than all of the rest of ours, but we'll make do with what we have.
So just going back to the E&D, you know, and I know it's all preliminary, but we're looking at maybe roughly $350,000. Can you just speak to what has our E&D been in the past, say 2 years? Because I'm sure you probably have those off the top of your head.
It's been up around 600,000, give or take a little bit. And we usually typically for the past couple years, we've put 500,000 towards our next fiscal year budget. So it's going to be a problem next year.
So, and I want to make sure that that's clear to everybody that we've pledged 500,000 of our E&D every year, but we're only going to have 350 total. So we certainly can't pledge that amount. Plus we have to always have some monies in our pocket in case there is something that comes up that we're going to need to pay for. So that will be something we'll have to address, and add to that your comments on school choice. We'll have to start really looking at those two numbers and how they play into FY22 budgeting sooner rather than later, so we can put everybody on notices where we think we're going to be, especially not having a state budget and knowing where our monies are coming from even this year. So I just want to put that out there so everybody's aware. We're already starting behind the 8 ball next year. Anyone have any questions or comments for Ms. Geister? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our next topic, which is finally we're getting to our Superintendent Formative Assessment, which is the mid-cycle review. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Casavant, and I'll have him lead us through the objectives that we've set in place for him and give us the highlights of where we are, where he is, excuse me, on those objectives, and then we can offer feedback and commentary. So I will turn it over to Dr. Casavant. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what you have before you obviously is the objectives, which both, and it says CAO, but obviously that'll have to change. But certainly Kate and I really share the same strategic objectives and initiatives as we work together, and that's how we position these as we created the plan. So the first objective is culture. Shift to a learner-centered culture to maintain what's most important for each student. The district improvement goal is support administrators to develop systems to promote a learning-centered environment. Again, I'm going to quickly go over those, and then I'll get to the evidence, which I think it makes the most sense. So the second strategic objective was the MTSS, which is to implement tiered systems of support for academic and behavior to improve student learning. This has been a focus for ours for quite some time. But the student learning goal was to build the capacity of the NRSD leadership team to use data with staff for improvement of student learning. And the third strategic objective was communication, and to improve communication to ensure the flow of information, identify areas for growth, and to promote the good work that's happening at Narragansett. And so, but below that, though, is the professional practice goal was to continue to strengthen the internal and external communication to both community stakeholders and the district employees. So, with all that said, we have it color coded, quite frankly. But so in the red is showing the what had taken place as of November 2019, and then it was updated through May 2020, which is of course in blue because this is a working document over a period of time. So in terms of their initiatives, the offer professional development organized around the theme of learner-centered culture, which is under the first objective, which is under culture, to shift to a learner-centered culture. And again, Madam Chair, do you want me to talk about the 2019, the red, as well as the blue, or do you just want me to go with the information that would be new?
I think you could probably touch on
Okay.
both and
Sure.
spend more time on the updates.
Okay.
Although I know COVID's going to have not a lot going on in some of those.
Right. Right. So we developed some of the actions that we developed around this is develop a vision for what a learner-centered culture actually means. And we created a text-based protocol around student-centered schools, closing the opportunity gaps, taking a relationship-centered approach in the June 2019, last June leadership retreat, middle school professional development incorporated the learning-centered culture theme, and the high school professional development incorporated this learner-centered culture theme as well. So it's been a focus for both both the middle school and the high school. The second action was to ensure the productive, use of staff meetings. Staff meetings was it was certainly one of the things that we really wanted to change. It was, just instead of just shoveling of information both to and fro, we really wanted more FaceTime activity, to analyze when administrators have FaceTime with teachers and how to best use this time in light of, the school improvement plans and the district improvement plans. We wanted to make that connection for all district staff and how they affect those goals and objectives. Middle school example of a faculty meeting agenda that's attached. Again, this is evidence. So obviously you have access to all of this evidence that we've put together. The elementary example of a staff meeting agenda. So then we kind of ran into COVID, right? So due to COVID-19, staff meetings have become virtual. So each school held regular staff meetings and/or administrator office hours for staff, and I think that was a switch that we had to make, obviously, quite rapidly. But I will tell you that they did so seamlessly, both not only the staff but the administrators themselves, as well as the administrative team. We implemented student leadership trainings. That was a primary focus for the high school, which will which will be a focus for FY21, and hopefully we'll be able to either develop in person, but if nothing else, virtual. And organizations are certainly offering more opportunities virtually, which we are looking into. We wanted to employ the strategies to ensure the principals and CAO at the time offer organized professional development. We do a lot of consensus planning around professional development. We certainly look at needs for the district, but we also want input in terms of what staff need, and we've done a lot of that, and that was available to folks. We started a learning walkthrough protocol with staff and of course administrators, and that was scheduled throughout the year for all buildings. We really focused on SEL focus of inquiry. New teacher mentor training, which are the slides that we presented, that has been certainly improved over the years in terms of not only the content, but around a focus around the growth mindset. PD feedback updated through March. That's an important, bit of information for us as we do PD, as we offer PD. We want feedback from our staff and from our administrators. Remote learning model. Well, we were thrown into that quite, right into it. So, but we really started to establish some very sound instructional practices, under the conditions that we were under. So, in looking at all this, we started talking about the evaluation systems as a tool for conversation, tier 1 instruction. And we've done a lot of things, such as we've scheduled admin teams focused around that. We've had 5, at that point in time, continued through February 2020. So it's certainly a focus. We promote a system to encourage teacher reflection as a response to classroom observation and feedback. As you can see through our minutes and our notes, the leadership team discussion of educator evaluation system. We want that to be a conversation. It shouldn't just be top down. It needs to be, we actually dabbled with teachers talking about setting their own goals, maybe something that they wanted to work on personally, not just because of the frameworks or whatever the case is. And we did a lot of work around that. The MOU, due to COVID-19, suspended teacher evaluation. So we really had to kind of stop, the process, in March, but we certainly have the framework to keep improving in that area. Establishing a teacher leader, that's been a huge initiative, and I will tell you that it's certainly benefited the district. I believe all the educators and of course the students, but we use our teacher leaders really to, as we have our focus, they go out and they really make it happen in their individual schools and in their areas of expertise. So again, what you see there is all the agendas. We've We've done collaboration through PD, some common planning times, which we now have during our schedule. One of our newer objectives was the K-12 writing type coherence mapping, creating with the middle school and the high school, monthly secondary meetings, of course, through the CAO. Again, some of those meetings did not happen because of COVID, but actually, I believe only one meeting was not held, which was in March, when each building at that point was really looking towards regular meetings. But again, we'll have to see how that goes. So in terms of, what we've done with our strategic objective number 1, in terms of culture, in terms of shifting, we've done a lot of work within the last year. And we've brought a lot of people on board to help with that work, and mostly from the teacher's perspective, from the teaching core. It isn't top down, which was certainly our focus and our desire. So objective 2, the implemented tiered system of support for academics and behavior to improve student learning. We have been working on this since arrival, but we want to use data to inform decision making, and we've done a lot around that. We wrote and received the grant for STAR, which is the early literacy, which funded some PD, Renaissance, which is STAR training, Edwin data from MCAS, which is free, but obviously to be trained on that. We STAR reading and mathematics will now, I believe, K through 12. Is that right, Kate? I want to make sure I say that correctly. That's kind of new, but we've done certainly trainings on that, administrators and STAR support, for administrators and teachers. So those are the dates. So we've really taken a hold of this data, making sure we found something that's going to work for us. And we've worked really hard to train folks to be able to utilize it and to, of course, understand it and interpret. We guided principals to develop practice to showcase student attainment of high academic and behavioral expectations. We don't do a very good job bragging about ourselves. We don't. We've said that before, and we don't need to brag about ourselves, but certainly we need to brag about our kids who do, excellent work. So a lot of the work, around the elementary to celebrate Warrior of the Week, which of course people love to see their picture on our Facebook pages of the Warrior of the Week. We adapted the ACE, which was a big undertaking, but of course ACE, our accelerated programming, but due to COVID, we had to kind of take a step back. But elementary uses positive behavior PBIS to recognize and reward. We've done those trainings. We've done middle school learning about the reinforcement of social emotional competencies. A lot of our PDs focus on social emotional well-being of not only kids but of staff, which I think that sometimes we forget about. We've developed a system to differentiate instruction tiers 1 and 2 and 3. That has been a big undertaking. We need supports to do that. What you need is an understanding. You need to be trained, right? You need to understand what the tier systems are and what are the strategies that go along with that. Teachers grade through 8, 1 through 8 regularly looked at the STAR data to inform their instruction. Middle school ELA department, been looking at its MCAS data, and discovered necessary shifts. So using data though to make positive shifts, not only in our curriculum, but in our approach to kids. SWIS, we added SWIS, the system for information and training. This must sound just like white noise to some folks, I realize as we go through. I can hear myself, but we've certainly built, teacher understanding of solid tier 1 instructional practices. We need to move forward, need to really strengthen tier 2, tier 3. That comes with not only resources, which I've already mentioned, but it comes with training. Overall, what we've done is had a lot of conversations, and we've created time in order to talk with teams, as teams, I should say, through common planning, through professional development, to make sure that it's very focused on what we want to improve on. So again, talking about communication, which is always something that we're trying to improve, to ensure the flow of information, identify areas to promote the good work. Every building has a Facebook page. That is a huge piece in this community. Lots of folks do gravitate towards Facebook. Our web page has completely been redesigned. It is certainly more user friendly. It is more easily accessible. We have put out more information in the last year, letters, and just we also have either the Friday or the Monday memos, or the weekly memos, depending on what we're talking about. from the building principals. So that has been, that's been very well received. We have regular meetings with the NDEA. We talked about that.
Dr. Cazavan, your volume has somehow gone down and we can't really hear you.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, now you're better. That was weird.
I don't know.
Okay, now you're good.
I said some really great things, so I just want you to know that. So yeah, communication. So I don't know where I left, where you heard me or whatever, but we do meet with the NDEA quite a bit. We meet with them weekly. The more we're in conversation, the more we can, work through issues or non-issues, just in terms of moving forward. So that's been fantastic. We have the teacher leader positions. Again, we're building internal structures to communicate. And time has been a big part of that. And so I've already really mentioned a lot of how we do that with our community in terms of our updates. Each school has now a social media. We do have a Twitter presence. We have a Facebook presence. And so that's been helpful. We've worked with the district technology department, have done a lot of work making our website more user-friendly and ADA compliant. That is nearly complete, if not complete at this point in time. That was something that Mike and his team worked very hard on, and it looks fantastic. So when we talk about external structures to communication with the wider community, we've talked a lot about that, especially around budget time. Last budget, again, I have to go back a year. COVID kind of, thwarted some things, but we had over, 12, 14 meetings, I think in person. PTOs have been, of course, invited to attend school committee meetings. We've met with the PTOs, implement high regular parent meetings, half-day conferences, etc. So in essence, in 1 year, we've done a lot of work. I would think that what we've done is create time in order to do that. We've taken away a lot of the white noise of things, meaning, the extraneous things, the things that really don't fit the mission. We've had to leave them behind. A lot of more technology, thankfully, to be frank, because thankfully because when we went into COVID, a lot of that played out nicely and allowed us to communicate better, Facebook, etc. And to make our staff moving forward, if there was another color, maybe yellow, we would say that, a lot of this training that we're talking about going forward for next school year is going to be focused on instruction, but how we're going to communicate and to roll out that instruction. So there's a lot of things. You saw a lot of evidence. We're not there yet. Some of it was, again, delayed because of COVID, but I think that we're on a very good path to completing, the objectives ultimately.
Great, thank you. Anyone on the committee want to offer some comments or questions at this point in time? If you just raise your hand in the video, I'll just call out. Okay, I don't see anybody at this point. I had a couple of questions, and it's more an observation, but it relates to the strategic objective number 3 of communication. What I'm finding interesting in this time of COVID, because we haven't had physical events for coverage in the news, and I'm really thinking more of news coverage, which is a little beyond what these initiatives are, but I think we need to start thinking about that. If we have limited events for coverage, how do we get positive coverage of the school? I've yet to see anything about graduation in the paper. I want to offer my own opinion. It seems like we really don't have a reporter from the Gardner News that somehow gets assigned to cover our things. And I don't know if there's something we can do about that, or if we need to just start pushing more press releases to get our own press out there.
I think the point is well taken. I think that, the times that we did make, quote unquote, the paper, and I'm thinking about when the seniors were picking up their gowns, and they were, in early June, I believe, that was a picture that we took, we sent in, we wrote the blurb, those type of things. And I think that that's how we're going to have to do business. They often inquire, but then, and at times then don't follow up They might ask us some questions or ask us what's going on. So you think that something is going to follow up, but it doesn't. So since we lost our beat reporter, which is now almost 2 years ago, quite frankly, we don't have anyone assigned to, I think, to this general region, but to this area, maybe with the exception of the Athol Daily News. We do see that reporter on occasion. But I think the point is well taken. We're going to probably need to do a lot more publicity work, which at all levels, just to get our kind of our position into the paper. Absolutely.
Anyone else have any questions or comments or feedback for Dr. Cazavan?
Yeah, Margaret, I just quick. So Chris, I love the obviously the communication is always a great tool. And I really love the thing about hitting the kids where they live on the Twitter and Facebook and things like that. But a lot of this is one-way communication. I do see that we talked about implementing the regular parent meetings. And I'm wondering, were those well attended, and did we get a lot of the feedback? You talked a little bit about things that don't fit into the mission. You know what I mean? Did we get feedback or are we getting feedback from those missions? Is that how we're making some of the changes?
I always make a joke about as many surveys as we put out, and we do. We put out quite a few surveys. I'm going to go back a year when we were doing the budget piece, and I think it was 7 or 8. We called them, I think those cupcake meetings. We were making fun of something, but I think a grand total, we did 7 or 8 of them, if I'm remembering correctly, and I think we had a grand total because we were keeping track, and I think we had 25 or 20 something people came over at 8 meetings at various times. I think that to answer your question, how is it two-way? Is that I don't think I've missed any email that's been written to me directly. As many know, I'm begrudgingly on Facebook, and do answer when things come my way in terms of any type of Facebook questions, etc. Realizing that's a very small group. But we do publish, in the terms of Facebook and our Blackboard Connect and all the ways that we can connect when we do have meetings, when we do need information, we do put it out in blast. We put it out in every possible form. Depending on what the topic is, it really is dependent on how many people are giving us feedback. I'm going to talk about the survey we put out. Over 80% of our families gave us feedback on this schedule. So it tells me a couple things. One, that people are getting the information, so they're receiving that we need information. It may be topical, and some folks don't want to, or just don't feel like they need to weigh in. We're going to have a forum of a Zoom forum here. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit next week, scheduled for next week, in terms of what school will look like. So, again, we're always open. I'm always open to, meet in any capacity and answer any questions. So I think it really is dependent, Jeff. I really do. I think that it just, when folks need to get a hold of me, they certainly do. I will tell you that when I put information out in mass, we haven't had a lot of luck with meetings. I would say, I would say that.
And I think that's the concern in the time of COVID and the budget, issues that we have going on. I think anything we can do to, and I know that we are doing a lot, but anything that we might be missing, or anything that we can help you with to improve, the two-way or the feedback that we're getting from the community would be beneficial.
We entered Facebook. We entered the world of Facebook based on what feedback from parents were. And we didn't go right to the website because people didn't really see the website as a place that they would frequent. So that's why we have we have our own, and every school has their own. Also, the weekly memos out from the schools have, when I say a big hit, they've provided a lot of information to folks. That's sent out digitally, and would of course send it in the mail if folks needed to be. But we're always looking for suggestions. We're always looking for, what can we do next, and how can we improve? Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
unmute myself, sorry. Anyone else have any questions, comments, or feedback for Chris? I just had one just general question, and I don't think you're going to have a firm answer on any of it is, but obviously when we set these objectives, it was pre-COVID, it was pre-budget in some instances, and we are resource dependent in achieving some of the objectives. So I guess my question, or maybe more commentary than question at this point, would be, how do we see ourselves in the next few months? I know that we're making plans now. So again, that's why I don't think there's an answer. And how do we shift to, be able to address these reopening plans that we'll discuss shortly and modify the, not necessarily the objective, because the objective we still need to attain, but maybe some of the initiatives around it. And I guess the question I really have is, if we say in 3 months we come back to and reassess these goals, initiatives, and actions, is that enough time for you, and I know you work closely with Kate, to kind of look at this, decide if we need to make some modifications based on what our reopening plans look like and what supports are needed and what resources we may either have or maybe we don't have in order to do some of these things?
Yeah, I think that we're gonna have to be nimble. We're flexible, just given what's happening now. As I quickly look, obviously our objectives, and you're right. I mean, regardless of for whatever we're doing, culture and the tiered system, though, and of course communication will, I think, are timeless, so to speak. But yeah, right. We've already shifted resources and our priorities to meet the needs of where we sit today, right? So what we need to do because of COVID. I think that, quite frankly, that some of these become even more important. The MTSS, the tiered system of support. How does that look? You're right. We still need that communication. If there are other ways that we need to communicate better, we're going to do that. But certainly some of the maybe the programs or some of the things that we were thinking about a year ago without even having any idea what was going to happen. Certainly, and Kate and I have talked about this. We may have to come to you and say, look, we might have to delay this, until we can come back full. And I would like, we might want to think about this. I think that would be I would think that would be a natural progression, just given, the uncertainty of times, but certainly just how flexible now that we have to be, especially with every dollar.
Great. So I'll look to put this back on maybe the October agenda, just to give us an update of where we are, what shifts or changes, what supports you may need. And especially that's usually the time we start kicking off the real budget discussions for the following year. So it's probably a good timely discussion. So
absolutely.
And I would just like to say that, I personally appreciate everything that you've done for the district for the past year. We've been able to move the district and continue moving the district in a direction that I see has, elevated the educational supports, has a culture shift and buy-in from everybody. I would love, and this is my own personal thing, I would love to see more student voice, but that I always say that as much as we can figure out how to do that as we build that into your objectives. And I know that we've started some really great initiatives, and to continue those, again, challenging based upon how we may have to reopen. But I think that the district is, when you look at things, and you've said it before, like our school choice numbers, that this district is a place where students want to be, where families feel safe. And that's a reflection upon all of the efforts that yourself and everyone who supports you top down has done. And that also shows, great faith in your leadership for everybody. So I want to thank you for everything that all the work you've put in the past year, plus all the years prior since you've been with us.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you. I have a great team. So when I say it's easy, it's not. But when you have good people, it certainly makes it a lot easier. So thank you.
Any other comments from the school committee at this point? Okay, I think everybody's waiting to get into the meat of our agenda, but we have one more item, and I don't think there's an update yet, which would be the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee. We're just carrying it on, and I don't think we've had any movement since we agreed to sign the contract. So unless Dr. Casavanth, there's anything that's happened other than that?
I'm sorry, you went, you
regional
broke up for me. No,
Yeah.
the regional agreement, I have we received it in the mail from Mars, their signed version. We received it yesterday, I think, in our mail. So I need to move that.
Yep.
Of course, to the committee.
Yep, and we voted on it last week, so
Yes.
we've already approved it, and I guess I probably need to come in and sign it, so we'll
Right.
get that going and start work there. So the next topic is, I think why we're all really here tonight, is the school reopening plans. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Casavanth and Ms. Calise to give us whatever information that you have on that and share with us where we're going. I just want to bring up to the community again, please be patient with us as we work through some of these things. We have 2 deadlines, as I'm sure Dr. Casavanth's going to speak to. We have one this Friday, we have one August 10th, and they support each other, but the one on Friday is more of a feasibility study, which he'll speak to. And there's so many moving parts. I've heard the term, everything we put together is really a living, breathing document. And at any point in time, anything we've put together may need to be changed. So again, I just ask the community to be patient and supportive as we work through these issues and adhere to the constraints that we're being put upon as these plans are developed. So with that, Dr. Casavanth.
So
Can you enable sharing, please?
I was just going to say, if you could enable sharing. So Kate and I will tag team a lot of this information, and we'll just kind of go back and forth. So Kate, you do? Okay. So what we've developed, and you should have received this PowerPoint sometime last evening, early evening. Really a thumbnail sketch at best as to what we have found, and what was, in terms of the feasibility study and how we're poised to move into any one of the 3 in the 3 plans. So as folks know at this point, is that we were to create 3 separate plans, and a full in-person would be number 1, a full remote, which we've just came out of, and a hybrid, which and there's a lot of different ways, but part in person, part remote. And so what I want to do is stop here and say that what we're about to present here has been developed as with the state and the guidance that we have received from Department of Ed. So they gave us an initial guidance of look to 6 feet, right? Make sure that we practice social distancing between 6 feet. That, as we all know, changed a bit to no less than 3 feet. So anywhere between 3 and 6 feet. So this, I want to make sure that I keep saying this over and over again, because we are giving you the information based on the requirements and the guidance from the state of Massachusetts and of course the Department of Ed. Okay, so I say that. So all 3 plans utilize teachers' current contractual time. This is just as one, as one caveat as we move forward. Some quick talking points we sent. We can certainly keep that there, but the full in person, after we went into every room in this district, and the principals had the wonderful job of measuring and remeasuring every room, moving out furniture, keeping in mind that there needs to be a certain bubble between the teacher's desk, for example, or space and chairs, all the guidance that has come forward. The room analysis was completed. No building can accommodate even a 3-foot social distance given the rooms and staff available. Now, we put this not possible given the guidelines. Again, to remind folks that, we're not saying that we would never do full in person because it's a personal, it's not time yet to give, of course, what we think, right? Our recommendation, but given the guidelines, given the parameters in which we had, we do not have either the room or the staff, or in some cases both, to bring in all students either at 3 or 6 feet. And so that's important to know right off the bat. So full remote. Plans are nearly ready for full remote instruction with schedules for each building. These schedules provide for regular instructional blocks. One of the things that, and I know that Eric spoke to it about being more rigorous. We certainly we knew that we needed, matter of fact, the state has also said that it had to be more robust in terms of what we would have to provide if we were in a full remote situation. And so part of that is schedules, that provide a regular instructional block. Obviously that need to be equitable for students and teachers, but may include full in-person instruction for certain groups. So what does that mean? Well, part of the DESE guidance is that there are certain either students with special needs or high risk, students who are in high risk categories may, regardless of whether we're full remote, may need to receive some type of instruction in person. So I'll use speech and language. Yes, there are opportunities in which that can be done full remote, for example, or OT, PT, but there are some, there are some instructional practices that folks need to be there in person. So I want to make sure that ultimately that when we say full remote, it would still need to take into consideration that some student groups would actually need to receive some of their instruction in person. So we were really left with the hybrid plan, and in thinking about everything that transpired over the last 3 to 4 weeks in terms of the guidances changing, et cetera, we really see a hybrid need to be phased in. Okay, so where we want to be in terms of a hybrid, and then ultimately, hopefully, after precautions or after we get a vaccine, et cetera, obviously, hopefully we'll be back in school at some point, like the old days, that we knew that we had to phase in this hybrid plan. So if you look at this plan, when we start talking about group A, group B, I'm just going to stay on the top row right here. So group A would be, essentially say half, or the kids that we can potentially fit into the room given the guidance, which we'll talk about in a little while. So group A would come in person Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, again, would be used for, as you can see, deep cleaning, teacher common planning, meetings, collaboration, small group instruction, etc. But that would be all virtual. And that would give our maintenance folks time to go in and to do the type of cleaning that would need. Because on Thursday and Friday, group B, who were receiving instruction virtually, they would be now in school, right? They would be in person on Thursday and Friday. So you can see that group. So there's ultimately, it's not something new. A lot of folks in this area and beyond, when they start thinking about hybrid plans, they are looking at this A-B hybrid model. We added in, like many other districts, group C, which again is that group of students at high needs or who need specialized instruction. And you would see that they could very well receive instruction or specialized instruction all 4 days or 5 days, depending on what it would, in terms of their IEPs or their need. Group D, would be the full remote. So again, the survey that we put out just recently, we asked again, if given your choice, and we believe that student choice is important, parent choice is important. We do believe that student choice is important too, but in this case, parents, that, we have roughly about 170 families in this district. give or take 750 responded, which is around 84, 85% of our families. And 80% of those students wanted to send their children back to school in some manner. When we asked about busing, about 50% stated that they would need busing or would have their children bused. So given that, hybrid, just kind of give you the numbers. So we got a lot of information back from parents. So going back to the hybrid plan, part in person, Group A in-person instruction 2 days a week. In the morning, they would transition home with a bag lunch, and then remote learning for that same group. Okay, they'd go home, have lunch. There would be some type of follow-up, but remote learning would continue for Group B and for Group A in the afternoon for a specific amount of time. The alternating in-person instruction for Group B, we talked about that, right? Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. That day 5, the deep cleaning, that Wednesday in this case, would be for all of those important pieces that we would need to take care of, not only cleaning, but collaboration, but also check-ins with students. And there's a plethora of things that will and can take place. Yes, Kate.
So I just want to say, we looked at this as a phase 1 because with all the guidelines about students congregating and not congregating and trying to keep them in cohorts and so forth, one of the very most difficult issues we're facing is lunches. With 800 plus students in this building, for example, how do we accomplish lunches under these guidelines, which is, very difficult. So a lot of districts are looking at, some different options that include things such as what we've listed here, but this would be phase 1, and then there's a hybrid plan B in phase 2.
Okay. Sorry. Phase 2, again, just to really piggyback on what Kate just said, one of the things that we've really worked hard at is lunch, and how could we in a phase system have students attend the entire day. Now, when I say this, I want to go back to the cohort. It only can work given the state and guidance in a cohort model, A, B, for that matter. So that is something that we worked on quite a bit. And Group A in this phase 2, again, still a hybrid. Group A in-person instruction 2 days a week, but now it'll be all day. All right. So I'm gonna, again, times haven't really been decided, but let's just say 8 to 2:30 is the day. Then they're going to be here all day. Lunch at school remains to be solved exactly, because let me just explain it a little bit. In order for you to take your mask off, you need to be at least 6 feet apart. Well, we've already talked about the fact that the classrooms themselves right now cannot be configured 6 feet apart. So they're at 3. So we have this issue that kids will need to wear masks while they're in class. Well, if you go to lunch, there's this issue that you may have to take your mask off to eat. Okay, I say that tongue in cheek. So we really had to look at the cafeteria and say, okay, we now need to move 6 feet apart so they can take their masks off, face one way, the whole bit, so they can eat. The actual nuts and bolts of that still need to be worked out. We would probably have to use one of the gymnasiums. Matter of fact, we would have to use one of the gymnasiums, probably at the middle school, I would think. Quite frankly, we would have to, purchase tables. We would have to. There would be quite a run up to that. But anyway, that's what it would. That's why it's taking a little bit longer, because we know that we need to find more space, and we have to figure out how many total kids can actually be in one spot, 6 feet apart. But alternate in-person instruction for Group B. Day 5, deep cleaning teaches instruction throughout the remote learning. So that cleaning day, if I want to make sure I say this correctly, teacher instruction will happen, but it'll be through remote learning. So go ahead, Kate. I know that you.
So One reason that that last bullet is different from the previous bullet is because in the first phase, we're utilizing that day 5, which we're showing on this schedule as Wednesday, but all of these details could be changed. We're utilizing that for some, small group instruction, but a lot of collaboration, because we're going to have a potentially largish group of students who are remote learning no matter what, because that's what their parents are requesting. We're going to have to you're going to have to think about who's responsible for those students, and those teachers who are primarily responsible for remote learning may need collaboration time on a pretty regular basis, on a weekly basis with the regular teachers, so that we make sure that we have that rigorous instruction. As we enter phase 2, hopefully we've gotten some of these things under our belt, and now we can add in some additional instruction on that day 5.
So I want to just pause here for a sec to just answer maybe a couple of questions. So in terms of, in parent input, I've read to you, obviously the data that we culled from our latest survey. And we know that 80+ parents want to send their children in person. So what this plan, this hybrid, really phase 1, phase 2 represents is our best attempt to do that, given some of the, I won't say hurdles, but certainly some of the physical features, not only of the buildings, but also our staffing needs. So this is why we went with this phased program. So we did hear what parent, we did hear people. We heard what our parent group said. They said, look, I want to send my child safely to school. This represents right now the very best way, the safest way we can do that, given, of course, all the guidance that we've received. So we also have, we have I'm trying to think, a group per building, a stakeholder group per building that really helped inform the principals think about just issues or just opportunities that pertained to that specific building, middle school, high school, and the elementary. So I want to speak to that. So again, this is, some of the bigger issues, as we know, is busing. We know that 80% of our families responded. That was fantastic. The survey revealed that approximately 60% will drive their child, and we'll get to that in a minute. That poses some interesting issues depending on what school that we're talking about, but it also means 60% of what, right? 60% of the number of kids who are going to go to a particular school or not. That needs to be, of course, figured out. How many total cars are we talking about? How many people are we talking about here? So that's important and we're going to have to get to that granular level. We're going to have to know exactly, and I'm going to get to buses here in a sec, but we need commitment from families in order to manage the buses. So we all know that the guidance came out for busing. We know that in essence, 1 child per seat, and depending if it's a 78 passenger bus or, whatever the case is, those numbers change, but you're really talking about 10 or 12 kids, depending. And we have some buses, of course, that if you were to do this on a regular basis, they'd have over 40 or 50 kids assigned to that bus, without exaggeration, or at least in the high 30s, low 40s. So some of that is just, that's daunting, because you're talking about multiple runs. You'll never get them into school on time or in any time. And how many buses would that mean? I mean, the cost would be obviously prohibitive. So we're going to need to talk about bus passes to manage the system, right? So people who are going to take the bus, we're going to have to figure out a way how we would choose or to select, and that child would have a bus pass. Because what can happen in these situations is if, you're running late, we'll say, we'll just throw, Chris on the bus because we're running late today. That can't happen. Those seats are already spoken for, because we have to make sure that only a certain number of kids can get on the bus because of the guidelines that we have been given. We need process for change for parents driving to buses. So we need to, we need to process for changes. So if a parent says to us, I really need to put my child on the bus, my life situation has changed, we're certainly going to take note of that, keep track of it, but it just won't be automatic because of the fact that we can only put so many kids on the bus. We'll need to process for change from parents wanting all remote, say, to wanting in person. Again, these numbers that we're speaking about, and we'll get into more finite detail, but there are only so many kids who can fit into the room. So I'm going to use the 17. Go ahead, Kate. I know that you've got your hand raised, but you're mute though, so no one can hear you.
I just wanted to reinforce that point in the last bullet, is that we have really asked our principals and processed really thoroughly for every classroom how many students we can fit at 3 feet and at 6 feet. And as you saw on the first slide, there's no possibility of spacing kids at 6 feet. And even with spacing kids at 3 feet, some classrooms have, 2, 3, maybe spaces available at 3 feet that if somebody wanted to switch from remote to in-person, we could put them in. Some classrooms are literally at 0. There's no extra space to put another kid if they switch. Some classes are kind of a couple short. So we're figuring, okay, we're a couple spaces short. We'll figure out, moving as much furniture and so forth as we can. So it's really tight in most of our classrooms, not all, but many of our classrooms, even at 3 feet. So that's why we need this process. And the state acknowledges this, that it could take up to 4 weeks for a district to respond to requests to change from remote learning to in-person learning.
So much of that would have to come through policy, school committee policy. That certainly has been discussed. Some of these things, not all, but many of these things may have to come through some type of policy / procedure. And again, not down the road too far, but those are some of the decisions that we need to make going forward based on the final plan. And busing, of course, transportation is the number one issue that we're facing, right? That and lunch. Anytime where kids have to mass, literally be, more than, more than they're supposed to be within, keeping the distance. So those are the things that we're working very hard on, and we are leaning on not only the state, but our fellow districts to kind of get a better understanding of what we can and cannot do. Is there next slide, Kate? That's it. So going back to the beginning, I want to make sure that folks know that our charge was to look first to full in person, educating all children within the confines of our schools, given the guidance that we received from the state. That is just not possible. So we then looked to our remote plan, which we've had more time to develop. Not that that wasn't our number, that wasn't our recommendation, certainly, but we went to that to look to make sure that we put those things in training, et cetera. To Ms. Hughes' point about making sure that we have the right things, where do we need to shift monies? Because again, it's a timing issue with budgets, et cetera, and actually purchasing some of the things that we needed, which of course everybody's doing all at the same time. Much of our actual work went into these hybrids. These hybrid plans have taken an immense amount of time, but I will say that many of the superintendents have worked together to work through some of our basic issues, which of course is space. In many occasions, some of it's personnel. The things that we haven't discussed here, but will need to be discussed, quite frankly, is that policies, procedures will need to be developed and written in terms of if people get sick. How does that work? How do we keep, how's the notification process, et cetera, moving forward? So there's quite a bit left to do. But, you know, these are the three, again, one plan we did not develop. And by the way, very few did in the state, as I know of it today. Most folks are looking to go hybrid, and or some combination of complete remote. There are communities out there who can in fact do, using the 3 to 6 model, do it all in school. I want to say one of our bigger, what we wanted to make sure that we did, and we are continue to do, is to give parents choice. That's the best thing that I think that choice is the best thing that you can give anyone. So if a parent, and we will know who they are, if that parents regardless did not feel comfortable that there's some type of extenuating circumstance that they could, have their child be educated remotely. That was a big part of what we wanted to make sure that we do. I do want to go just very quick about the difference between homeschool and remote. I hear a lot of people almost using that word interchangeably. They're not. Homeschool, if you take on homeschool, you are responsible for the education of your child, meaning that when I say you're not a member of the district, you are not a member of the school district. You certainly are a town member and taxpayer, et cetera, but you do need to submit a plan, an educational plan to the superintendent's office that has to be approved. So that's homeschool. Remote learning, obviously, we know what remote learning is. We've done so since March 13th. What I can say to you that if you were disappointed, and that survey showed that there were folks that felt that remote learning was not as robust and it was not as organized as it could or should have been. We understand that. Remote learning will be far more robust. It'll be more organized. It'll be, when I say in person, there will be teachers behind that, teaching, whether it be asynchronous or synchronous learning. But there will be people doing that. It won't be, I'm trying to think of, Khan's Academy or something to that effect. So I want to make sure I put that out there because they are not synonymous. You have to have approval to homeschool, and the educational plan has to be approved. Remote is something that we will do.
Mrs. Kojal, I see you have your hand up, sorry.
Yes, how are you determining who does the remote teaching?
Well,
Cut right to the chase.
I think that we're going to need, that's going to be, when I say it's difficult, I want to make sure that, there are some folks who may be medically unable to teach in front of children. Whatever the case may be. Could those be utilized? Maybe. Could those staff be utilized? Maybe. Otherwise, though, we're going to have to think very creatively how that's going to happen. What we know is that you can't do both, right? You can't be in class and, and teach unless we're going to do live feeds, which get into a whole other piece, but that's not certainly off the table. I'm just simply saying that live feed is a little bit different. But we'll have to make those decisions as we know what staff we have. Again, we need the plan first in order to start doling that out. It all depends on level too.
I have a second question. When you say Group A and Group B, are you going to determine those groups based on bus routes?
We've been instructed to really look at trying to keep families together. So that's one of the primary concerns, so that if you have 3 children, you don't have like some children in Group A and some children in Group B, right? So if they're all in Group A, that might enable you to work a couple days a week and so forth. So that's one of the considerations that we're addressing. Obviously, space in the classroom is going to be, we're going to have to try to split the students in a given building or a given grade in half so that we can manage that 3-foot spacing. Busing is going to be very complicated. I would defer to Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a statement that there's a lot of questions and comments coming up on the chat feed. And I did want to say we're not going to be able to respond to them at this point, but we will take note of every one of them and make sure that some answers, as well as we can at the parent forum, which Dr. Kazavant will talk about shortly. They will be addressed there. Some of them we may get to just as part of the discussion, because one thing that I think that we probably need to just address up front, and the big concern that I have, and I think probably the rest of the committee has, is we've received guidance from the commissioner that's going to allow us to take 10 days that were student learning days right at the beginning of the year and use them for professional development, which is fabulous. They've also cut time on learning. So the question is, what does this hybrid model do to the time on learning? I know that they're accepting waivers. Are we going to be looking for one? What are the initial thoughts on that?
So initially, what I would say is that we need to map out exactly how many minutes exactly for each. Again, remember, there's phase 1 and there's phase 2 in terms of the hybrid. We feel pretty confident that certainly phase 2 we'll hit that. We'll have to see what lunches do to that, quite frankly. But phase 1, we're tweaking the blocks of time basically to make sure that we hit those minimums or those times in learning. Kate, did you want to speak to that specifically?
Yeah. So so that's an analysis that is on the table to do. That is very timely, and it's we'll be doing that very soon. In order to get to this point, clearly it's taken a lot of time and input from people. So I would echo what Dr. Caspian said, that certainly in phase 2, we'll be close to time on learning. In phase 1, we may not be where we want to be, but I would also say that in the email threads with statewide, with assistant superintendents, and I think Dr. Caspian would echo this with superintendents, we're in as good a place as anybody else that I've seen with our plans. So we're going to definitely pay close attention to time on learning. I don't know exactly how that's going to come out at this moment.
One of the things that has been said more than once is that some folks really only have one option, whatever that option may be, hybrid or otherwise. And it is almost a matter of like, well, I don't want to say it is what it is, but if you only have so many hours in the day and you have to do whatever you need to do to either get kids in or to educate, whatever it is, and if you come up, say 10 or 15 minutes short, then I guess you'd apply to the, say you'd apply for the waiver, but many people don't have a lot of options. I think that what I like about our plan is it gives us really, again, a phased in, so to speak, potential. And so overall, I feel good, like the score of the year. I feel good about the overall number of hours. I do. Will we start off a little short? Maybe again, sure. But I think by the end, if all things work out well with numbers and I'm talking about, COVID positives, et cetera, that, in the end, we'll hit our number. I don't see that to be the big issue, quite frankly.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Mrs. Kojal?
I'm sorry. Are both of these plans phase 1 and 2 for the whole year, or will there come a time where we reevaluate if things are looking good to do something different?
Oh, absolutely.
Come back together in person.
Sure.
Okay.
So what we want, I mean, if I could dream, is that, the vaccination is just great. Everyone gets it December, by April, we're just laughing about this and we go along, go about our lives, right? So these plans are supposed to be flexible. They're supposed to be malleable. They're supposed to be able to be changed. They're supposed to, either increase or decrease our time together. That's how they're supposed to be designed. Quite frankly, you know, they would have to suspend the 6 foot, 3 foot rule for us to get back into school full time. But I would think, although, you know, I'm not the DPH or this, you know, but that I would think if things are going really well, that may be considered. Nothing is off the table in terms of that's a question that's been asked a lot at the superintendent's level, is that could we very well see our way out of it? In other words, just at some time the cloud lifts and we're back to normal. And of course, the answer to that is sure. That's what we're all hoping, but we have to create a plan in which, you know, to be able to come in and out of, you know, in-person learning.
I need a positive. I need to have that hope.
Can I add to that? If we, not to be on the other side of this, I completely hope and think that all educators do, that we wind up in a scenario where we can go full in person. But if we don't, what's different from the spring is that we left on March 13th and March 16th we were remote learning. And I laugh sometimes thinking that we thought we might be out for 2 weeks. And then ultimately, you know, we wound up being out for the full year. What's different now is that if we were in hybrid A and we felt like we could go to hybrid B, it's the plan is going to be, you know, ready. If we're in hybrid B and we feel like, oh, we have to go to full remote, the plan is ready. We have a schedule, you know, it's a little bit of a lot of a different situation because we do need to be nimble to go back and forth between these plans, and the plans will be developed, which is not to say there aren't a lot of hurdles remaining to be solved, because there are. Oh, sure.
Yeah, Mr. Marks, I think you had your hand up first and then to Mrs. Trufalo after.
Yes, it might be a little long question, but let me just start. So Chris, understanding, I do not fully understand the class schedules, the busing, the time blocks for learning and all that, okay? It seems like one of our biggest issues, or one of the biggest hurdles we're having, is with the no, we don't have room, okay? And I know we're going to the AB method, you know, the AB cohorts. Would it help us, or did the groups look at doing ABC and just rotate them then through the week so that we could actually bring more students into the seats? That's good. I do have a follow-up question to that afterwards, but if you want to answer that one.
We looked at there's been a lot of different scenarios, so don't bring back 50%, bring back 25%, and, you know, but the issue though, ultimately, is that it will limit the number of days that children will be in front of teachers. So it may very well, again, in one of the, it's only 2, right? So there's only 2 days that we're going to be in, you know, in front of the actual classroom teacher. If you start to dilute that number anymore, then you're really only getting 1. What we know is that we have to get them in front of our teachers, right? We have to get our kids in these buildings so we can, you know, we can do what we need to do and what we do best. It was tempting, Jeff, to be very candid, just to break it down to a number where every kid gets, you know, split the day, you know, and just go, okay, we'll get every kid in half a day. Well, then look, this is going to be difficult enough. And so now if parents are going to think about a half a day or 1 day, I mean, so we tried to make it as best, you know, again, as educationally sound as possible. And we felt that this was the best, you know, educationally, quite frankly. And again, if we can get this information out soon enough, then parents can react to that in terms of their schedules.
Oh, okay.
And cleaning. So the cleaning too is when you start changing cohorts of kids, you're going to have to clean differently. And so that deep clean, as we keep talking about, is going to be a little bit different than, of course, just your, I don't know what to call it, your day-to-day cleaning. But we have the misters, we have those type of, you know, things that will be able to really make sure that the place is safe for the next group.
Perfect. So Chris, on the other one, I know you talked a lot about, you know, that you've been having the conversations with other districts and stuff like that. With the online learning, the resources and stuff like that, I know we talked a couple of weeks ago about possibly sharing some resources with other schools. You know what I mean? In particularly, I think it would be helpful with the online learning. Is anybody else doing that? Have we looked into that?
So we have, and what we're all doing tonight, last night, tomorrow night, is we're presenting in front of our school committees. So we're trying to figure out, how we all sit and where we're at. I will tell you that the commissioner did say today that they closed the RFP for the online, learning, assistance or whatever the case is in terms of program. They would not give out any other information on that other than that there were 2 vendors that they were vetting, and that's all they said. So in terms of us training, so there's that, but we don't have any information. In terms of us working together, we've already talked about, we have some outstanding teachers, you guys know that, but we also have some folks who do a lot of great work with Google Classroom. And so we want to share that knowledge that we have, because we also have districts around us who do a lot of other great work in some areas that we're not so strong on. But what we need to know first is where we're all sitting before we can really commit and have a conversation about that. I think we knew that would be number one, but we're talking a lot about that. We just need to know, what our circumstances are so we can kind of match up, so to speak.
That's great. Thank you, Chris.
Mrs. Trufalo?
Unmute. Oops, I took myself off too. It's okay. And my concern is the reduction of screen time for kids. And I know we're doing better when we get them in 2 days. But I'm looking at, how do we do it and not just go through the motions of learning, but actually be able to, progress monitor and teach in small groups when they're only there 2 days. That's going to take some special planning. And the other thing is about special ed. How do we accommodate them with 2 days in an ELL? I guess all of that comes after you make the plan, but I think it should be part of the conversation now.
They're actually a cohort. So if you go back to the slide showed, I believe, was cohort C.
Mhm.
And that group, that cohort is in fact all of the above, so to speak. Students with special needs could be high risk. Students, various groups, special groups, folks who need accommodations, modifications. So we have them identified. When I say separately, I'm simply saying that we understand that schedule, and I certainly know that Eric and I and Lisa have had conversations about that. What our special educators know and our speech language OTPT, etc., know that a lot of they know that some of the things that they're going to need to do are going to have to be in person, and they certainly know that they're going to have to be over a longer period of time. So I think we've certainly identified them and thought about them individually, right? Their needs on an individual basis. In terms of screen time and small group instruction, well, yeah. So if we do the hybrid, it certainly cuts down on screen time. The time that's built in, we used Wednesday, that 5th day, but it certainly is a great opportunity to do check-ins, to do small group, I don't know, office hours. I'm trying to think of something, those that all give us the opportunity to work with kids who might just need some extra help. I mean, just because they do. So we think again, the only where it kind of falls flat in terms of screen time is that if we have to go all remote. There's really no other way to do this. I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to be 7 hours of just like straight, but it's going to be a scheduled time. We've talked about what that looks like. It's not going to be, again, 7 straight hours or anything like that. There'll be certainly breaks, but if I have Mr. Ivan down here on my lower right on my little grid here. he has X amount of, classes that he has to teach. And so they're going to have to be available to him, and they're going to have to go into his Google Classroom, and they're going to have to be instructed. And yes, they're going to, we're going to factor in screen time. I think that's one of the, I guess the positives of a hybrid, because we are going to be able to limit a screen time. By the way, not only for just kids, for our staff I'm just saying, it's equally concerning and troubling as well.
Yeah, my other question is, if the department has reduced hours of the day, do we still have to do all of our special arts? In other words, are students sitting for all of those, or can it be consolidated on certain days to core instruction?
So
Because that would detract from screen time if our specials weren't there.
So there are a couple ways first off, we're committed to the arts, and we have been and are, but there's a reality that if I only have X amount of time, we have got to get to the brass tacks of the matter in terms of literacy, math, etc. So, but what we've talked about quite a bit is that either or, that your unified arts folks could be online on those off days, or during, say, the cohort A, when they go after lunch, they could be at time, or the unified arts that can take place in person be one of the break areas. The problem is that the guidance that came out on our unified arts, they gave these great examples of what things you could do, and then it said underneath, cannot happen indoors at this time. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. It gave these great, 10 feet apart, you could do this, you could play the trump, band can happen outside, okay. But all these other things, great ideas, but they can't be done inside at this time. Well, I mean, that's not the guidance we need, right? The guidance we need is how do I, provide the arts inside, and in person. So we've got some pretty creative folks. So I think that, we'll figure that out, but we'll have to fit that in. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mrs. Chartier?
So in the event that there's an outbreak in any of the schools because of siblings and everything, are we going to be prepared to go full remote learning like the next day? Is
So
that like
there's-
something you've talked about?
Yes. Oh, that's all we've talked about. So we, quite frankly, those 10 days, like them, not like them, what it does for us is it provides us an opportunity. And our staff have done a nice job. Even the folks who weren't were not used to doing online learning, they learned under fire. But those 10 days among the trainings that we're providing right now are going to assist us in doing that. The expectation is exactly that in 24 hours or less, that we would say it is an all remote, for whatever reason, we need to go all remote. And then it has to be seamless. And so everyone, of course, will have that schedule as well. So you have an all remote schedule, and you have, of course, your hybrid schedule, but we have to be prepared for that, and it has to be rigorous, and it has to be robust. And by the way, I know so of course I want kids in front of teachers, right? And teachers in front of kids. So that's the best way we learn. But I will tell you that when it's done right, and we are getting to that point where the masses are getting to the point that you can provide solid instruction virtually. You can, but it's a different skill, something that we're not really used to because we don't do a lot of, but we are getting to the point where through the training and through the different platforms that we will use, Screencastify, I say that right, things like that we've learned that are going to help us to do that. That's the kind of training that we're providing to, of course, not only on the drop of a hat, but will be robust, and it'll be quality instruction.
It almost feels inevitable that it's going to happen. I know that's only my opinion, but it does feel that way. That what's an outbreak? Is it 5 people? Is it 10 people? Is that considered an outbreak?
Well, an outbreak. I
Millions?
mean, an outbreak. I think some folks were talking about percentages, et cetera. But you'd have to look at it and almost take a common sense approach to it. You talk to your board of health, who's been phenomenal, your nursing team, your health team, and say, look, I've got X, Y, or Z. We don't know. What do we do? And if, someone says, look, we better, go all remote until we can figure this out, that's how prepared we have to be. We're thinking that that's going to happen, meaning we're just preparing that that's going to happen. And that's how we're preparing our, our training.
My other question too, or my other thought, probably doesn't need an answer, and it's not going to be, and maybe it's not going to come from us. I think we might have talked about it last week, but the thought that athletics may be able to start on the 14th or no earlier than the 14th or the 16th, whatever the date was, that doesn't seem realistic to me either.
We discussed that today. Yeah, we discussed that via the commissioner's report, and the commissioner used his own daughter, big softball player apparently. She wants sports in the worst way. We have kids who come to school for the arts. They come to school for sports, and in between they learn something, which is important. At no point though is anyone going to put, the health at risk, because of sports. I think that we've been asked, probably the hardest questions have been around athletics. People have said point blank, if you are an all remote, will you allow a football team to play football? People have said that to me. If we're an all remote and we've got an outbreak someplace, my answer very candidly is no. If we're not safe enough to be in school, folks, then I don't know how we're going to do it on the football field, as an example. Now, the commissioner said that there are a lot of conversations with a lot of people about how to make football and other sports safe, basketball, etc. What they're going to have to get around, though, is how do you then watch the game? Because what we know already is that you can't have X amount of people, in a certain spot. So they're going to they know this. So they're going to try to give us guidance. So I don't know that they'll leave it up to us. I think it'll be a blanket decision, because you can't have one district say, I'm not playing football today or playing soccer today. We just had an outbreak, another or at all, because we're in full remote. I think that that'll be made at the state level. Sports right now are, first off, they're important, very important. But our focus is getting our educational house in order first, and I think that will then lead the way. So that's my hope.
Anyone else have any questions, comments, feedback at this point? I just had one other thing. I think that maybe at our next meeting, if we could take a look at the school calendar again, and be able to put that out there with what we're thinking. And if you see any adjustments, what I don't know, and maybe someone could follow up on, is initially the governor had created Patriots Day in I think September. And of course, that's not happening. Are we still bound to it being a state holiday? Because I think we worked it into the last schedule. If it's not, maybe we can get that day back. So, I'd like to have the discussion maybe at our next meeting so that we can have some firm dates and what we're looking at for when the teachers come back, when those 10 days start, and when we'd expect the students to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. We are. It's off when we checked out. That holiday, it was not listed any longer. So we are trying to get some guidance on that. We know that we have a new holiday added, I believe June 19th, Juneteenth.
Yeah.
And depending on when school ends, it may affect us one way or another. So we are trying to get some clarity. I don't believe it is any longer a holiday, but we need to have that verified, because I'm very unclear on that.
All right, so we'll add school calendar to our next meeting, or the one after, maybe on the 15th, because I know we do need to talk about upcoming meetings, because the school committee needs to take some action. But I know you also wanted to discuss and put out there what your thoughts are for some parent feedback. Did you want to do that now?
So what I realize is that there are 32,000 questions. And so what I was thinking is that next Tuesday, because I knew that we would meet today. And I thought that given if Tuesday, that I would hold two, in essence, community Zoom meetings, or two community virtual meetings, whether it be through Zoom or through Google Hangout or whatever, but at two very different times. One mid-morning, and these times I would, of course, put out there, and one in the evening. And to try to accommodate people's schedules. So that would be something I'd like to first off organize. But the second thing is, I think that we meet on Wednesday, so we would have to maybe push back the school committee meeting to maybe I know it's Wednesday right now, maybe Thursday, to give folks time to process the information that comes forward, because we get a lot of great input and answers from our community, and I would like to have time to factor that in.
Okay, so just from a committee perspective, we should probably this evening take a preliminary vote so that Dr. Casavant and his admin team and the teachers can have a path to go down. But we will need to do a final vote on the ultimate, I'm going to say plan, but understanding that it is very fluid based upon circumstances, next week, which is why we do need to meet next week. So there's two deadlines, just to remind everybody of. July 31st, which is Friday. There was a template that was sent out. It was kind of more of a high level feasibility. What can you do? Where do you think you're going plan that needs to be submitted. But August 10th is when we need to put forth a plan to the community. So we have two pieces to work with. So what I'd like to recommend, with that being said, is one, I think it would be good if we could make some sort of motion to, I was taking some notes of how to word it, to vote on a preliminary reopening plan as something that Dr. Casavant's going to recommend to us, and I'll have him speak through his recommendation first. But the second piece is we do need to schedule a meeting for next week, as Dr. Casavant mentioned, and we'd like to do that on, really, we're looking at Thursday or Friday. And I know we try not to do Fridays for a whole host of reasons. Would we have a quorum? Maybe if you could just give me a hand raise for Thursday at 5 so I can see. Okay, and Hank, I saw yours up. Vicki, I know you're not available. Jeff, would you be? You've got your hands up. So I think we all have a quorum. So let's plan on our next committee meeting being Thursday. I'm just gonna write this down, Thursday. Kate, somehow we're seeing your screen again. All right, so Thursday at 5 p.m. next week will be the school committee meeting. All right, and Kate, were you sharing your screen to show us something else, or so?
I was looking for the slide actually, so that way I could speak to the slide, because it.
Perfect.
So my recommendation is that we go with hybrid A in terms of the phase system. Obviously to start the school year. I want to say that, of course, taking into consideration where our region is in terms of our numbers and our positives and all the things that guide almost everything that we do. And I want to just give, so folks have said to me, well, why? Well, what I know is that we have a lot of training to do, but a big part of that training is for our students. We are going to need to really have them in front of us to teach them a lot of different things depending on their, on their grade level, right? On their age level. And I can think of no better time that we will be, quite frankly, the safest. If numbers hold and we are, we're the best region in the country, depending on the numbers you look at, we are, we're in good shape. I'd like to utilize the safest window, right, of time in order to put in motion this hybrid plan, and to obviously prepare us to come back full, like normal someday. But we need to get them in place first. And I find that the hybrid plan A, again, phased in, is the best opportunity to do that. And again, all things being equal and doing as well as we're doing in September would be the best time to do that. So my recommendation is to go with hybrid plan A, which is part in person, part remote, as discussed.
So with that being said, I would entertain a motion to approve this preliminary reopening plan, this hybrid plan A, as recommended by Dr. Casavant.
So moved.
So I have a motion by Mrs. Kojal. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second by Mr. Mason. Okay. Any questions, comments, or concerns? In addition, Mrs. Trifilo?
Let me see if I'm, yep, okay. I have a concern that we hear from the parents, and I know we have a week before we have to vote. So how is it, this is being worded as what? A favorable plan, or? Can we
Preliminary.
have motion again?
Yeah, the motion was to vote on the preliminary reopening plan. So this is just kind of the path that we're heading, and it could be modified before it gets back to us next week.
Okay, as long as the parents understand that it is just that.
Right. And I think, to your point, Mrs. Trifilo, that us taking this vote and putting this down as the path that we're looking at may give parents more concrete information to ask their questions around. So I think it's helpful for us to actually do this for the parents' sake.
Yes, and that was my primary goal. It also allows staff to think about what lays ahead. It also, quite frankly, allows the NDEA and myself to start looking at the an MOU and those type of things. It at least starts in motion a lot of things that we definitely need to move on. Again, with parent input, we do have the input that folks wanted their children in school, but they may have a different view on how that happens, and I'd love to hear that on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
But hop on.
And I can't see everybody's faces on the screen, so if you
Can
have
can I clarify a point,
Sure.
please? I just want to clarify that this group C in person may be, 3 to 5 days, it may be 4 days. It's more than the group A or group B, but it implies here, because of how I merged it, that it's 5, and it may not be 5, it may be 4 or some subset of that.
Thank you for the clarification.
Margaret, just a comment. I just want to say that I feel, and I believe that everybody here feels, that the best thing for the students is to return them and get them back into the seats. But we are working, based on the restrictions that have been set upon us by the Commonwealth and DESE. I think this is the best plan that we have, the best option that we have at this time. And I just want to thank Chris and Kate and all the building teams that worked so hard to put these plans together for us. So just thank you and kudos to you guys. Thank you.
Great. Ditto. Anybody else have any questions, comments, feedback before we take our vote? Okay, seeing none, the motion is to vote for the preliminary reopening plan as recommended by Dr. Casavant, which was that hybrid A plan. So we will do a roll call vote now. So if the committee wants to unmute themselves, so you're ready. Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yeah.
Mr. Marks?
Yeah, yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mrs. Matson?
Yes.
Mrs. Robichaud? I hear a yes, thank you. And Mr. Mason, who did join us, and I didn't say this at the time, Mr. Mason joined us at 5:08, by the way. Mr. Mason, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So we are unanimous that we've approved this preliminary reopening plan. And I just want to reiterate again, Tuesday, Dr. Casavant will be conducting some sessions. So he will get that information into everyone's hands as soon as possible to let them know when and how that will happen. And our next school committee meeting will be scheduled for Thursday at 5 p.m. And we will meet obviously via the Zoom platform at this point. Does anybody have anything else related to reopenings, school reopenings at this point? Okay, I don't see anybody. I did just want to make a comment. We've received a lot of questions, comments, and observations on the chat feed on YouTube. Mrs. Varney did put a note out, keep asking the questions. These questions and comments will be shared with Dr. Cazavan and his team, and we'll try to address every one of them as best we can on those Tuesday sessions. So you'll get some answers if you didn't hear us answer any of them during this conversation. So, okay. With that being said, we will go to the next section, school committee comments. Does any member have a comment that they'd like to share? Being none, we'll move on. I'm going to throw this back to Dr. Cazavan. If there was anything else outside of the topics we've covered that you wanted to make the committee and the public aware of, I think we've covered just about everything.
I don't think there's anything else that anyone's ever talked about, as far as I know. So this is it.
Okay. We did not have any other items that were not reasonably anticipated within 48 hours. I don't see any correspondence that hasn't already been addressed during our public session. And our upcoming meeting, as I said, we've just scheduled one for Thursday. That would be August, is that 6th, I believe? I don't have my calendar out. Did someone confirm, is that the 6th of August? Yes, the 6th, thank you. So Thursday, August 6th at 5 p.m. The following date for a meeting is Wednesday, August 19th. We also have a meeting on the books for, and we'll have some regular business at that one as well. So with that being said, if there's no other business, we will be going into executive session this evening for reason number 3, which would be to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation with the NDA and or the UFCW. If an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. And this meeting will not return to open session immediately following. So I would entertain a motion to enter executive session for that reason.
So moved.
And I have a motion by Mrs. Chartier. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second by Mr. Marks. I don't see any comments, questions about that. We'll take a roll call. Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mr. Marks? Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mrs. Robichaud? I hear a yes. Mr. Mason?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes, so we have a unanimous vote to enter executive session. So this will end our public session of our meeting. I want to thank everybody for attending on our Zoom platform, as well as those who are coming in and watching us on YouTube. We appreciate the feedback and the questions and the comments. For anyone who has any additional comments, please feel free to send them probably to Mrs. Bart. Is a good spot to vet those through. So if you have other things, and be on the lookout for some Dr. Cazavan on a Tuesday meeting for the parents. So with that being said, thank you, and we'll adjourn the open portion of the meeting.